Morning, Karen. Okay.
How are you? What the costs are? Do we look at what we're coming back to? Or do we just continue to Band-Aid? Yeah, whatever you guys want. I mean, however you want to handle it. Okay.
All right, thanks. You're very welcome. It's very nice meeting you. I keep seeing all the videos.
I didn't get the memo.
How you doing?
I didn't get the blue suit memo.
Chuck Joseph.
I'm Joe.
Nice to meet you,
Nice to
Jody.
meet my pleasure.
You met Chuck?
I don't mean anybody. I live on my own island there.
Right now, yeah. You're gonna be the last man off the island. Just in case we need any technical, historical.
Yeah, sounds good. I thought what I would do is just kind of talk quickly, like a second about the lease. Is that okay?
So this is why we're coming.
Yeah, and just talk a little bit about the lease, determine the lease, all that stuff, then we take over, talk about the program and stuff, and then the last slide is the piece I throw in there, it's just a picture of what they want to do. And so we can just talk about it. So 2033.
33.
It's a 40-year lease.
Okay, so that's all detailed out.
Yeah, I went through Mickey found the lease book. So
When did it start?
93.
So it's 30 years.
So yeah, so I got the entire lease here. I'm looking at that. So yeah, so
1 minute.
basically.
It's going to be 30 seconds.
It's rained out. They got a tournament this weekend, which is, whew.
Yeah, and to have no idea what you're doing, although they have such great rhythm and preparation, and the attorney talked it through. I mean, they really prepared me without any preparation. I was like, thank you for being very in sync and
then boom.
giving all the information. No, I could tell it wasn't as soon as that was over.
I'd like to call the April 20th, 2021 School Board Workshop to order. Item number 1, the Regional Firefighter Training Site.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate that. Yes, the first item is our regional firefighter training site, and the county is building a complex over around McIntosh Middle School area, and they have approached us to see if we wanted to be a part of that. And so we have information today that we wanted to just share with you about what we're doing presently, and then also what this regional complex would do for us, so that we can then talk about whether we want to be involved in this project. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jody Dumas.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about the Fire Science Academy and the great program that Ron DePill and his team have out there at STC. As many of you know, many of you have been to the site. Our current site for fire science training is the majority of it's done out on our Fire Science Academy site, which is located at the corner of Beneva and Fruitville on a property there that we lease from the city. We've been in that lease agreement for several years, actually since '93. Our lease will expire. It's a 40-year lease. It'll expire in 2033. And so as we take a look at that facility moving forward, as Dr. Asplin has said, we've been approached by the county. They're building a regional training center right off of Knights Trail. What's the thoughts about us partnering on that development versus where we currently are? So in that evaluation of the current property, working with Mr. DiPillo, in terms of in his staff, looking at what we have out there, that's a property. If you've been there before, or if you haven't, we've got several facilities on that property. One being what we call the burn building, which is a very sophisticated building where the firefighters come in, they practice their skill set, and there's actually fire in the building. That building is been there quite a while. If you look at the facility, it's been renovated several times. The equipment in there has been replaced several times. It's at the point where really the entire facility, all the equipment in the building is in need of replacement. And so just to kind of continue to support the program at the level we need to, we'd have to start looking at what we need to do with that particular building to actually rebuild. There's a smoke tower on that property, which we have gone through a couple of times. That's also getting to the point that it's at the end of its useful life. And then the remainder of the buildings are portable classrooms out there that have been there for quite a long time. There's no permanent structure for classroom facilities out there. And then there's an apparatus building. So in terms of the entire facility, building-wise and facility-wise, we're really at the point where we need to look at what do we do long-term to continue to support that program at the level it needs to be supported at. So having said that, our lease expires in 2033. Some of the provisions in the lease are that at the end of when that lease does expire, if we were not able to extend it, anything we have put into that facility out there in terms of buildings, things like that, become property of the city. And so as we look at where we currently are and in Ron's long-term projections for that program, I guess the question becomes, do we want to continue with that lease and do some investment out there at that particular property where we know in a few years that might become property of the city if we can't extend the lease? We're not sure exactly what the plans are from the city there. Or do we look to partner with the county and in the mid-county type training facility that would be there long-term and where we would invest to put kind of state-of-the-art buildings to continue to support the program. So with that, I thought maybe Ron could talk us through kind of what his vision is for the program in the future as we think about what that might look like in terms of our capital budget. So.
Yeah. Thank you, Jody. Thank you. Thank you for having us today. I'm companioned here with Chuck Joseph, who's our coordinator of the Fire Academy. Chuck's a longtime firefighter in the region, and then now been with us probably 3 years as the coordinator. He has great relationships with the county, and as you know, fire equipment is very expensive. With those relationships and Chief Regner, we have great access to equipment that we don't have to purchase because of our partnership with the county. We have great access to also human resources, as you'll see in the slide presentation. Slide presentation. Here we go. So this is the property, and I don't know if you have that on your screen or if you have that in the handout. This is the property currently at Circus and Beneva, which is fronted by Fruitville. Right behind there is Bobby Jones Golf Course, the public golf course, which is a very attractive property to developers also. And this is one of those pieces that has that commercial frontage that so many investors have approached the city on in terms of trying to take over the property. We would like to stay there. I mean, our property has been established there. Our business is established there. We wouldn't mind staying there, but of course, with the demands of development, 30 years ago, this might have been on the outskirts of town, and now it's right in the middle of the hub of everything that's going on in the Beneva Fruitville corridor. So our expectation is that the city may not want to renew that lease. So planning accordingly and you being good fiscal partners and of money, we were considering we need to do some improvements. But before we invest money in this property, we wanted to bring it to your attention that the county has approached us, as Jody said, and moving forward with a potential partnership on land that is centrally located because we are a regional firefighter training center. We reach all the way out east to DeSoto, north to southern Manatee, south to Charlotte, and then most of Sarasota County. But if you look on that picture there, there's some portables to the right, the burn building, and some, those are fire pits that fire pits at the bottom.
To the bottom, the
Yep.
propane props.
Propane props. A lot of technology in there to maintain the liability and reduce the liability of any injuries. So there's a lot of technology involved in these buildings and in these props. When you're fire training, there's a lot of uncertainty as people have not experienced the heat of flames or going into a building that's on fire. So we want to make sure we continue to maintain our safety. So we need to keep our equipment up to date, and that's very expensive for us. Just so to give you an idea, yearly numbers, these numbers are current from last year, beginning of this year. We run different cohorts over the year, so the numbers do fluctuate a little bit. But typically, the Fire Academy will see about 450 students a year. And those are broken down into different groups there. And as you look at what happens after these students enter the program, they're on a piece of property there. This is our current facilities. It's about 5 classrooms. Those are all portables. We have one office building that is also a portable. There's a tool shed there to maintain equipment. There's an air barn that holds all the tanks and the equipment for tanks. There's an apparatus building that would hold either an ambulance, fire truck, any kind of emergency vehicle, which probably is about 12,000 square feet. So we really work on a very small area for the number of students that we have and for the extensiveness of the program. It's very concise. They do a great job with our current facility. As you'll see, when we bring in our part-time staff, remember, most of our programs are taught by practitioners in the field. So where do we get those? We get those part-time staff from all the fire agencies in the area. Many of them, there's 100 or so part-timers across all of these different programs, but many of them only work a little bit because they have a specialty in their training. Fire science, fire chemistry, there might be one on evac, but these people who are trained in the county are the specialists in the county, and they come and train our students. So they're getting a very high level of instruction from current practitioners in the field. They also get to go and do ride-alongs at times with these people. And so our fire departments, local agencies get to see our students in action. And typically what that means, as you'll see here, is that 100% of them get placed in enrollment because the instructors are the people hiring these students. You'll look at our completion rate's about 71% as of that 1 year, and there's a lot to say about 71% with this strenuous and rigorous type of training. Some people find it's not for them, and they leave the program. There's some very strenuous physical tests at the end that can potentially have people not complete. But everyone who does finish the program it's 99.9% placement.
So again, this is kind of a summary of our current site and our current lease. Again, the cost of the lease is $1 a year, so it's a $40 lease. But again, it expires in 2033, and Ron kind of ran through the buildings as well as I did earlier. Every one of these buildings out there is in need of some kind of an update, just in terms of not only structure, but certainly the systems within these buildings. And so we're going to have to, if we want to maintain any type of a quality program out there, we've got to have the facility and equipment to be able to present that. So we're going to have to spend some money either here or potentially at the Knights Trail location, depending on what the board would like to do.
So we currently have been band-aiding that property together with fixes, temporary fixes, knowing that there's been some conversations from other agencies also. I know Northport's building a facility or trying to build a training facility. So we've been reluctant to come forth and say we need a total rebuild because we were wondering what was happening region to region. But at this point in time, my thought is that as we want to grow the program, all the chiefs agree that STC is the training provider and that we're doing the job that they need to be successful. And they want to keep us as a regional training provider, not just for one specific type or one specific fire agency. And Chief Regner has expressed that several times to me, Chief Regner for Sarasota County Fire. And I think and Chief Titus down in Northport also says the same thing, that they want STC to be the provider, whether or not we're on their property or not. But it makes sense for us to be in a regional location, centrally located in the county, so that we can attract students to the program and make it more feasible for us to access the Sarasota County Fire Department's equipment and those resources. Now, it depends, and that's going to be a long-term lease there if we get involved, because I think they're going to invest a lot of money in that property, and they want us to be their partner. And so that's why we're in front of you today.
Ron, if you go one more slide.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep,
I
you
thought
go
that
one
was
more
it.
slide.
There it is.
This is kind of the initial. So they've got a planning team in place with an architect, and so this is the construction manager for their side of the project is Kim Humphreys. You might have remembered her. She partnered with us down at the library and STC during that partnership with the county, and so she is actually working with their architect, and they've got kind of a site layout, a concept layout of what that might look like, and so that's here for you. I know it's a little hard to see, so if you want a bigger copy of that, I certainly can get it for you. But just to try to give you perspective on what they're planning, it's a 32-acre site or so right off of Knights Trail Road that the county currently owns. And then our partnership with them would be on that property. So that's kind of a visual of what they're thinking.
Bridget?
Thank you. Well, I certainly love the idea of synergies working with the county. I like the central location. I know you mentioned that we've kind of Band-Aid it, but have we done any kind of cost projection of what the cost would be to get it up to speed, whether it's on the city land or what we'd be looking at when we partner with the county?
So I guess that's a great question. So one of the things we haven't had any experience in as of late is building a burn building. So we're assuming that's their county is currently pricing that. So if we were going to do anything on our property, I think at minimum we'd be putting up a brand new burn building. That's probably $2-3 million to do that. And then portable classrooms, in terms of what we have out there, we'd either be replacing the portables or bringing in a small building. So we think on our property we'd be spending 2, 3, 4, probably upwards of $5 million. Again, in initial conversations with the county, that price may move too, but that's kind of around about $5 million is what we're talking about here too. Again, if the board wants to go in that direction, we'll have more solid conversations with the county about what all that looks like. But I think in either place, we would be spending probably upwards of close to $5 million to get that facility to be again, back to what it was originally when it was first built.
And I guess the thing is, and again, I think there's a lot of benefits, as I said at the front end, but from a cost analysis, either way, you said we'd be having to build a new one. I don't know if there are different code issues or anything like that when we're talking about renovating on our current land, or if we're talking about new space, because there's a highly regulated.
Yeah, and so in our current facility, remember the burn building especially, right? There's like high temperatures in that building, and I know we renovated that 10, 15 years ago, and there were some structural concerns at that point. My guess is that structural integrity hasn't gotten any better over time, so I don't know that we can renovate in the current building. I think that's probably a demolish and rebuild. So again, that's the same thing on this property versus where we currently are. Some of the flexibility may be in. Do we continue with portable classrooms? We yank out the old portables down there, we put new portables in. Here we'd be looking at probably a more permanent facility. So I guess some of the flexibility would be like in the classroom facilities themselves at Beneva versus at this new facility.
And one final question is, and I think I know the answer, but just for confirmation, from a capacity issue, because this is programmatic, this doesn't impact if we're getting rid of portables or anything like that, moving to the county site, that doesn't have anything to do with our overall capacity, correct? Because it's focused on the program. Okay,
Correct,
thank you.
yes.
Jane?
Well, first of all, I have a long experience in the fire alarm market, both personally growing up in the family of a firefighter and then selling equipment commercially in that industry for a lot of years. Life Safety 101 in it, NFPA 72, this state is very well known for a high level of rigor when it comes to fighting fires and when it comes to enforcement of fire code. And I think that's great. Although when you were on the other side of the fence and you were trying to design and you were trying to cut costs and, do some engineering to save some money and get the job, it was not always that easy to meet those stringent requirements. But my question is, what about the surrounding counties that we have, Manatee specifically, Charlotte, others? Do they offer these classes?
Yes, there's MTC offers them at Charlotte County. Englewood has a training center. I'm not sure out east, if Mr. Joseph out east, is there a training facility in DeSoto area? No. So basically, we work very closely together with Englewood and Manatee. I'm not sure about Charlotte, how close we work with them at all. They're just a little bit too far south.
Why does Englewood have a...
So I'm not sure
I'm just
why, but it
curious as to
exists,
why.
and then because maybe they were back in the day, they just had the training facility. I'm not sure I can speak to why they have one versus not participating, but in our training. But they do have a training facility there. I can't tell you why. But we do train firefighters that end up working for Englewood and many of the volunteer fire departments. And Chuck, I don't know, our most recent estimate for just band-aiding the building technology-wise was $350,000 for just the technology to run the flames.
That's just the burn building.
Just the burn building.
Yeah.
The technology runs on a Windows 95 laptop that we have separate because the technology was designed for a commercial application to open and close solenoid valves for the fire. So it's and Jane's shaking her head yes, but it runs on Windows 95, I believe. And so that's the technology that we're stuck with. And every time it breaks, it's very hard to find anybody that understands how to reprogram their control mechanism to a Windows 95 device, and it's not supported by Windows, obviously, and it's not supported by very many. Right now, we have a band-aided fix again to maintain the building. As an academy, we need to have an operating tower on our academy property, or else we will not be certified. So we continue to work and try to keep that and maintain that. And when this offer comes up where we're going to have some opportunities to share facilities and share the cost, and for my recommendation, I think it's something we need to investigate and then find out what the bottom line is. I just hate to see us invest $5 million in a piece of property that we're going to turn over. It might be beyond all of our times here, but I don't think that would be good use of our funds.
But firefighting has changed a great deal. And we all know that there is a lot more technology and a lot of smart ways of doing things. And I didn't get that from watching 911, but I do watch 911.
I watch Chicago Fire. That's where I learned it.
But in any event, those are my two favorite shows. But in any event, is it wise where we are in the community with the development around our current site?
So
is it smart to put that investment in that property that we have leased from the city?
So I'm assuming it's 12 more year lease, and that if you invest that money and it turns over to the county, divide your investment by 12, we will never recoup that money. We don't run enough students, 450 students through that program. It comes out to be quite a bit of money that we would have to recuperate from each student. I mean, just doing the math. So I think if they want to develop the Bobby Jones golf course into more of a residential community, I'm not sure they want our fire tower and
that's what
our
I'm thinking.
chemical burns going on right there. Years ago, it might have been on the outskirts of time for anybody that's been here longer than I have, but 93, I don't think it was as developed over there.
And if that's a great question, Ms. Goodwin. And if you look at the location on Knights Trail, the county has quite a bit of land out there. The transfer station out there, the dumps out there. So I think that's an area of the county where you're going to see other things, county kind of things like fleet and things like that. I believe to plan to go out there. So it's more of that type of a feel in that area versus I think right just outside of downtown actually at this point.
Tom?
Mrs. Ziegler pretty much covered. I still think that the costs are kind of nebulous for me still. We're kind of thinking $5 million. But I didn't hear anyone say exactly what the parameters are for the partnership with the county. What does that mean?
And that's a great question. We are absolutely not there yet with that conversation. And so, again, we were approached by the county in terms of this option. Would we like to partner out there? And so we said, let's take a look at it. We've had those initial discussions about would we like to, does it make sense for the program? But great question. I get given some direction today. We will have those more in-depth conversations about, how much of the facility are we going to be responsible for? What do those agreements look like? Who's paying for electricity? All of that stuff are still need to be had, given kind of the direction you give us today. But those would be kind of next step conversations.
So then what we're really just doing is sort of a heads up. We're talking about this, and we'll be back in front of you at some time when we have more information.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing is timing for the capital budget, right? I have not had great conversations with the county yet about timing in this facility because I know they're still raising money for some of it. So as we come back to you in May with our 5-year capital plan, given the head nod today that this makes some sense to investigate, if the conversation moves in a direction that looks like it makes some sense, depending on timing with the county, it would make sense to me when we come back to you with a couple of drafts for the 5-year capital plan, we would slot this in somewhere and see what you think about it at that particular point. But definitely more conversation as we move forward.
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, I think even if we do move forward, I would imagine there's several options out there on, how we're going to fund it and what that partnership looks like.
Absolutely.
I know I always enjoy going to the graduations and seeing all the families, and I'm always proud of what we do for our community. So I support what you're wanting to do, and I've had nothing, well, not nothing, but I remember complaints about those old buildings from the day I got on the school board. So I'd like to see us modernize, and if you're working with Windows 95, I mean, it's time. It's past time. So I think if we got a partner that wants to share those costs, that would be wonderful. I'm wondering, since the county is helping to pay for it, is the cost to students the same whether they're from the county or outside of the county?
Yes, our tuition is set by the state, and our fees are adjusted by what it costs for their consumable materials, equipment tanks, textbooks. So it's all set by the state.
All right, thank you. Bridget?
Yeah, no, I'll close with just that I think, thanks for the heads up. I think you brought up some really good points, particularly on the technology. We can talk about infrastructure, but that's a very important part, particularly from the safety standpoint. I guess my request is, as you, assuming that all the board members want to proceed with, the investigation process, if you will, is to provide us a pretty, as much as you can, a cost analysis, because I think that's really important. I do think that things lean towards making more sense on the synergy side, but not, as Mr. Edwards mentioned, some, what's the word you used? It was a good word, but not ambiguous, but the aspect of just having a little bit more granular of what we'd be looking at from a cost analysis, but that's all.
Karen?
Yes, that sounds very innovative, and the partnership with the county, and it has a career orientation. I'm very much interested in going forward. Great ideas. Thank you.
Okay, well, sounds great. We will have those conversations, and we'll be back in front of you with what we develop. Thank you.
Thank you much.
Thank you very much.
Next on the agenda is the superintendent evaluations. I had Kathy send out 2 copies of evaluations we did, one on Todd Bowden, and then there was another one that we did for Lori White. The way I did that is I thought we got into the weeds with the one with Todd, with all the numbers and how we were going to calculate it. Plus, it's very detailed, and I think it's a little difficult to evaluate the superintendent when we hadn't told him what our evaluation schemes is yet. And then we also, the one with Lori, even though it does have some things in there, we can easily change those, but that basically just says highly effective, needs improvement, or is unsatisfactory. And I don't know whether we even want to break it down to leadership, operations, finance, and community relations, because this is his first year and we've been working with COVID, or what kind of things do we want to evaluate him on? Everybody push the button. Jane?
Well, I think we want to evaluate him on COVID. He certainly has, I think, done a great job, but if anyone tells you that that hasn't overridden everything that Mitzi did in her wonderful time as acting superintendent and as Dr. Asplin's time, getting schools back opened, we would be not telling the truth, because it has been an overriding issue at the 30,000-foot level as well as at the ground level on everything we've done this year, and it had to be. So I think, for me, it is an important aspect of the job that he's done.
All right, so I've got COVID response as one of the things we'd like to evaluate him on. Bridget?
Thank you. Well, I think this is a little unique for a number of reasons, and so as I evaluated how we would evaluate, one thing that I thought would be helpful, Dr. Asplin voluntarily provided us prior to his appointment, but also gave us an update of his 90-day plan, which I think does a really good job of kind of highlighting some goal areas. Not only is it something that I believe while we establish our strategic plan, and I'd love the feedback from the board here, but I think a lot of them highlight areas that we all focus on as a board and would evaluate any superintendent. So I thought that would be a good place to start. I recognize, and I'm going through here, I don't know that COVID was in here, but certainly we could include that as part of the evaluation if you want, but hopefully that's not something we have on an ongoing basis year over year, God willing. But I do think that we'd be remiss if we didn't include those elements, whether we have a separate category for that or not. But I just thought that the goals under his first 90 days would be a good framework to start with, and I wanted to entertain some discussion around that.
Yeah, well, I would also like to see, board relations, how is he communicating with the board? And another one would be the overall, I'm trying to think of the word that I, how the district feels about the school district. I think those relationships with the schools, I think is something that's important for our superintendent.
They're in his first 90 days.
Yeah.
Bridget?
Mrs. Rose, I just have it up here that you just hit two areas. Goal number 1, build positive, honest, transparent, trusting, and effective relationship with board members. Goal number 2, learn the district's culture and evaluate the climate. So those are
those are good.
Those are checked off there. And develop positive, honest, trusting relationship with all stakeholders, community, and district. He has detailed. These aren't just high level. He's got very.
Where are you reading this from?
He sent us. Well, certainly before he was appointed, he provided this to each of us as board members. And
the 90-day plan. Oh.
And then on Wednesday, 3/24, he emailed us an update with all of those goals, which there are.
Okay.
8. I'll forward it just so it's on the.
Yeah, we can get them. So yeah, maybe we'll look back on those goals. Should have thought about that when we were discussing it. Tom?
I like the idea of working from those 90-day goals as a jumping off point. I think that, in the grand scheme of things, we're all making accommodations for understanding COVID is overlaid on all of this. I reread the contract, and in there it said, as I believe I read, is that we were to provide goals as well within that contract. Do those exist? That would be a no. Okay. Lastly, my other thought is while we are, I did a lot of investigation and best practices and phone calls with other board members around the state. And what I think it might be a good idea for the board to consider a mini retreat to discuss the evaluation in a grander scheme and include it into the strategic plan. If we're going to roll out a 10-year plan, a real master plan of evaluation might be a good thing to add to that process.
Thank you. Karen?
Given, Madam Chair, the conversation started out.
Put your mic on, please.
Sorry, thank you. Madam Chair, the conversation started out with any superintendent having awareness of what would be the standards of benchmarks in their evaluation. And given that our superintendent gave us his 90-day plan, I think that it is a win-win. And if we were to review that, it has a lot of things in it that would be in an evaluation geared toward the Sarasota County community. And I'm all for the best practice of a evaluation being part of the strategic plan. My caution with that is that our strategic plan will not be complete until past what would be appropriate to evaluate him. So I go back to, in all fairness and best practice, the goals that we accepted upon, that this board accepted upon hiring him, which I think are very adequate, high-quality goals for the first 90 days. Dr. Asplin, thank you.
Bridget?
Yeah, I'd agree both there. So I just forwarded it to everybody so it's top of your email so you have access to it. But going off of what Mr. Edwards said, I agree. And I think that as we get, so Mrs. Rose made a very good point. I think being that the contract sets, we have a specified time where we need to evaluate it. We have that framework. So if we all agree as we review this, I think that's a good framework. But utilizing that and going into what Mr. Edwards said, which I wholeheartedly agree with, and I think even to the point of how we evaluate, even a little bit more nuanced to Mrs. Brown's point when she first brought this topic up, that we set a retreat in conjunction with the conclusion of the report that we get from the strategic plan, and that we sit down and iron that out. My question to Dr. Asplin is that part of the, was the evaluation process or anything in that part of the strategic plan that the company would be providing us any guidance on, or is that something we'll just run with on our own?
Yeah, that's a great question, but I think I believe that when you give your board input to the company as we move forward, if that's something we want to place in there, we can certainly do that.
But we will come forward, if you wouldn't mind, I will take Bridget's suggestion and look at his 90-day plan, take the suggestions of what we've talked about here, and come up with an evaluation tool that we will bring forward. The one thing I want to get a question on, do you want the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or is highly effective, needs improvement enough? I'm asking the board. I seem to be looking in your direction, though, don't I? I mean, I think if we just put the highly effective, or needs improvement, or unsatisfactory would probably be sufficient, and then we wouldn't have to be adding and dividing numbers.
I agree.
Bridget?
Well, I'll just say two things. Whether the language is, I like the highly effective needs improvement, unsatisfactory, because I think that's consistent with what we do from an evaluation process to all of our staff, and I welcome any correction if that's not accurate. As far as the numerical part, I know this has been something in the past, and I mean it just in the aspect of overall, I see it as, where I saw the pros and cons to it. As a board of 5, there's going to be differing opinions, and so it makes sense to not just have a majority vote of, let's just hypothetically say, highly effective, which I think, but that we balance everyone's opinion on each various goal, and that's where the numerical part benefited, where, if you say highly effective is a 4 and unsatisfactory is a 1, and combine it that way, it's just that process of how we submit that, I think, is where we came afoul. That's my only point, and I think is beneficial, that really puts weights it as far as each individual board member in totality and to each goals.
Karen?
I would like to, when you bring this back, review the instructional evaluation. If I'm not mistaken, I think there is a satisfactory and such, but I do think there's a numerical value to it as well. And how does that, what is the benefit of both from a standpoint of moving forward and having our goals met?
Yeah, is there a numerical goal or something? What do you do for administrators?
Yeah, so I think what I could do is give you the information that has to do with evaluations for others, like our teachers, like our evaluators, and we can look at that and align with that. I wouldn't want to be any different than anybody else in that sense. So why don't I put that together and I'll give that to you, and then we can move forward with that.
Okay. And you know, I'll try to sit down with the superintendent and bring you something next workshop that we can use in June. And so we'll have one or two more discussions on this in May. Okay? Tom?
Yeah, I was just going to say that something that is easy and for us to get through for this particular evaluation, and then I think a deeper dive if we want to add numerical or not as we begin to develop it for the 10-year plan makes the most amount of sense to me.
Okay, we're moving right along, and now we are on the budget discussion. Are we?
Yes.
There they are.
So Mitzi Corcoran and Krista Kurtner will share the next information here on our budget discussion. Yes, there was a... Yeah, they're on there.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to turn it over to Krista to kind of give you an update on where we're sitting currently in the current year and how the budget's being developed and where we're at for next year. And then if we want to start talking about some of the discussions as far as the legislative budget and where that's going, we can talk about that after. So, thank you.
Good morning, everybody. So you should have received a narrative and a spreadsheet of where we anticipate to end this year as far as where we stand right now with results of operations through February. And in the narrative, which we'll go over, is basically everything is still trending pretty much the same as what we've seen. As you know, our FTE is down from our projected. We were supposed to be about 1,152 FTE higher than we actually came in at. And we have been working with a hold harmless for that, which was wonderful. We did get the fourth calculation of the Fvfp just a day ago. So that helps us to know if we were estimating on target. And what we had done before in prior updates, we had estimated that we would be about 1.5 million sharing in the proration for the growth in the virtual and other schools. And it came in about 940,000. So it was obviously very close, yes. So that's Mitzi and all her wisdom. So she's always so great at looking at all factors. So that's wonderful. Something that did come in higher than we anticipated was the Florida Family Empowerment Scholarship. That came in greater than we anticipated. So, but of course, that's still offset by the revenue loss, so we're still fine. So with that being said, we can look at the spreadsheet that has the general fund revenues and appropriations and look at the variance we can see there. What you see on page 1 of that sheet is basically the additional reduction for the scholarships there. And that's really the only change that we're seeing in the state and federal. Page 2 has what we anticipate based upon where we are through February. And that really isn't much of a change. We basically, rental income is down, obviously even more than we anticipated. And interest is up by just estimated 41,000. So, but you can see from what we were originally anticipating, we're down over $2 million in that revenue. So that has definitely impacted us.
Ms. Kurtner, if you would, when we talk about these rows, can you give the row number?
Sure.
That would be helpful.
Yep. So the row number is, for the interest, is 100 on page 2. So you can see in column H, 91. I'm sorry. 91, you can see in column H, 2.7 million was what we were anticipating for our interest income. And then you can see in column M that it is actually down to 194,000. So that is a big difference, but we were anticipating that. That's been built in our budget. So, and then you can see on 100, basically the food service indirect costs is down, which we already talked about having to help out that fund. And then in 109, childcare fees, you can see that, am I on the right rows? I feel like I can't. Okay, hold on a second, I'm sorry. Okay, so yes, so 109, you can see that we're down there as well. And basically you've seen in our schools that childcare is down just overall through the district. So the schools are definitely feeling that impact. The federal indirect cost is coming in a little bit more on 113. And the miscellaneous local revenue is just trending lower by about 300,000 there. That also had included in it an unexpected sonic wave where we got another 2 million this year. So that kind of helped to offset the loss of the interest revenue that we were anticipating. So that was good. So overall, you can see that we are down from our amended budget about 1 million overall. So if you turn the page, this is on the appropriations, page 3. And on line 140, salaries, you can see in column O, we're trending downwards for our salaries, and this is based upon the vacancies that we have. It's also based upon the reduction of positions that we needed due to current decline in enrollment. The benefits, of course, are associated with that respectively on line 141. Purchase services, 142, are coming in higher than what we anticipated just a month ago, which is mainly due to utilities and water and sewage. So that's where we see the increase there. Purchase services charters trending the same. And on 144, energy services is trending a little higher. And again, that's due to electric. So materials and supplies, that's the line item that has the adoption in it. We had increased that. Column L, you can see we increased it, which came in a little bit lower due to Commissioner Corcoran getting a reduction there. So that's helping. And then just overall, we had put funding in there just to offset COVID costs, and things seem to be trending a little bit better. Capital outlay is on 146, again, just trending down a tiny bit. And other expenses, 147, trending a little bit lower. So overall, you can see that on page 4, on line 227, you can see what our ending financial condition ratio is, or anticipated to be, 12.17%. So that's how we're thinking we're going to end right now. Of course, every month is a new month, so we continue to evaluate, but everyone's being diligent. So now we'll go into next year. So if you want to flip back to page 1 of that worksheet. And what's been entered in these, so as of Friday, this was current information, but then things are ever changing, so we got a new update just a day ago. So, but we'll just start with what we had right now, so we can kind of talk about that and then talk about how it's changed slightly. We don't have the full run of the House, so we just have a summary for statewide. So what we had in front of us was the House and the Senate proposal. And so you can see on column AC and AE how that varies from column L. So you can see, where the reduction is. The Senate was obviously lower. So if you go then to,
But didn't the House include some of the federal dollars in with theirs?
So, so yes, they did. It's not included as a component of the FEFP, but it was a part of the education budget overall.
Okay, but this is just showing FEFP dollars?
Well, this is showing all dollars, but the CARES Act dollars would be shown in a separate fund. It's not part of the general fund.
Thank you.
So, but yes, the initial proposals from the House and the Senate was status quo. The funding was exactly the same as it is this year, just for less students. The Senate's had a $52 increase in the BSA.
the House.
But, I'm sorry, the House, you're right. They also included a $335 million reserve. So when you're looking at the total FEFP, it looks like it's a lot larger increase in funds per student because you can only access that reserve if those students come. The Senate has something very similar in theirs, but it's kind of at the back of the bill. It's a $350 million reserve, so it's actually a little bit more, but it's not a component of the FEFP. So it's kind of skewing the funds per student, because if those students come, then it goes into the BSA and all of the individual line items, and now your denominator's larger for the number of students you're serving, so your funds per student actually would go down.
They're using that reserve so that they don't have to do the clawback and take money back from us? Is that what they're
Correct. Both of them
anticipating?
have a reserve in order to try to avoid proration if the students come back. Yes, both.
Thank you.
Both the House and the Senate.
So back to page 2 of that. So basically the local, what we have there, you can see that the, again, that's obviously lower with our RLE, our required local effort. And it's mainly due because we're supposed to have less students. So, and then if we, and I'll go into more detail about each of the runs through the FEFP, just trying to show you as far as with how the revenues will compare to the appropriations of what we're anticipating. So if you go to page 3, so this is the appropriations that we're estimating. This is a result of the staffing process that is in place right now and how the positions are being allocated based upon the FTE that's been projected by the state. So you can see, you know, we're obviously having an increase. This is based upon full staffing. So obviously there's not always full staffing, and we don't know what next year will hold as far as vacancies. This year was very tough on the schools. So you can see that there's an overall increase, and this is already built with the 0.5% contractually included increase for the staff. And it's and again, it has the CARES information in it. So if you look at line 148 on that, you'll see that in the House, what we did is we reduced the amount of CARES funding that would be available to offset the expenditures in that, because they're going to take part of that and basically assign it for how they're wanting it to be used. Whereas the Senate, we were able to use the full $20 million. So that we still have built in at this point in time the transfer to the Food and Nutrition Services. That's hopefully a worst case scenario, and we don't know that we're actually going to need that, but we are obviously trying to be safe. So then you can see as it goes down onto page 4, which I know is always of interest, is the general fund and how we anticipate our ending financial condition ratio to be. For the House, 8.42. For the Senate, 8.72. So as Missy was stating, the Senate is basically just status quo. So if everything stayed the same for us, that's what it looks like it would be. So obviously that's still above the policy. So now if you want to go to the comparison of the FVFP school funding worksheet, and this gives the breakdown. This gives the breakdown comparison by the revenues, so you can see the actual changes within each categorical and FTE. So if you're ready, so on and again, this has been updated. Now we'll have more information once we get the full run of the House. But as you can see there, the House has an increase on line 17 of the base student allocation of the $52, which has gone up in their next run a little bit. and the Senate was status quo. Something to note about both of these runs is that on line 7, the unweighted FTE, that is based upon the first sweep that they went through and they worked with us. We had a second chance to go in and make some adjustments. They allowed us to have some growth, as I talked about before, for the redshirting of the kindergartners, about 187 FTE. So that's wonderful. So because should we see that growth now, we'll already be, so the next runs will have that in it, for, when we get to the final or second or the conference report. So as you're going down, you can see that of interest is the millage is going down, but they basically were keeping us status quo. And
Yeah, I think that was a really big thing this year, is that they allowed the growth to move forward for us, because we're a 90% locally funded district and we're serving less students. Our millage is actually going down because the total funds needed to be collected as less, and our values went up. So our millage is going down, but a lot of them have the exact same millage. The majority of school districts actually have been able to have the same millage rate as they had last year. So they've been able to now have the ability to take advantage of the growth in their districts. Just not us.
so just going further down, the teacher salary increase allocation is basically the same. I mean, it's a little different, but it's basically the same as what we currently got this year. One of the biggest differences in the initial House offer was that the supplemental academic instruction, they put a lot of extra money into that. It was almost $4 million, as you can see. I'm sorry, that's line 29. So that was going to be set for a specific purpose. This next one that Mitzi's going to talk about is they've basically pulled that back out. So going a little further down, you can see there's really not a lot of changes. The ESE guarantee they brought down, but we do have less students, so that makes sense. And the mental health allocation, interestingly enough, in the House went up a little bit, but in the Senate went down based upon the students. Teacher lead is the same, line 40. Student transportation, that is going down, and that makes sense on line 41 as we're not transporting as many students. So then going down to the required local effort, you can see there's overall, again, these reductions are mainly due to the fact that we are serving less students than we were projected to serve this year. And then going down a little bit further, you can see on line 60 and line 61, that was what was originally anticipated in the second calculation, but as you know now with the getting the fourth calculation, we actually have a higher number of the Florida Family Empowerment, so it's over $2 million there instead of $1 million.
Yeah,
And-
the fourth calculation actually has the Florida Family Empowerment at 2.57 million versus the million that was included in the initial runs by both the House and the Senate.
And so you know, as we are building the FTE forecast with DOE, they basically determine how that's going to be in our run. We try to work with them, but they usually have a number that they won't let us exceed. So that's how that gets in there.
Are they getting those numbers from students that are signed up for those scholarships?
Yes, and then they build it on what legislatively we're supposed to increase. That's what they say they use in historical information, which isn't very historical at this point.
And are they assuming they're coming from our schools or from homeschooling, or we don't know?
They can come from any of them, yeah. Anyone who can sign up, who qualifies based on legislation. So, and obviously for next year, we've built in a little increase again because it continues legislatively to be able to go up. So of major significance is, as Mitzi's pointed out, on line 70, the student reserve allocation. So the House put it in their, in their Fvfp run, but we received information that we basically should not count that as actually coming to us because we will not get it unless the students enroll. So the Senate doesn't have that in their Fvfp. So when you get down then to line 88, which it says, the total funds per unweighted FTE, and you see the variance of 315 with the House. If you were to take out the reserve, because we have to until the students show up, it's really around 193 more. So overall, if you look at that line, you can see that the Senate is 94 more, and then that would mean the House is roughly $100 more than the Senate at this point in the run. And now we have an update of the new details. So,
Krista, I'm sorry, you said the amount of for the House was 193?
Yes.
When we pull out the reserve? Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, Mitzi.
Oh, okay. So yes. So we give you all this wonderful information on Friday, and then over the weekend it all changed. So we did receive the fourth calculation of the Fvfp, which shows that overall our student count is higher than it was, or that what we were originally thinking it was going to be, but obviously lower than what we were funded on for the second calculation. They didn't do what normally they would do as a third calculation in December or January. They just passed on that because of the hold harmless. So then with the fourth calculation, it now is kind of truing everything up. So like Hendry County has a very large virtual program there, so they have a lot more students than they would have had before. Florida Virtual School, way more students than they were anticipating. And pretty much every other district other than St. John's, I think, has had some decreased enrollment. So they've kind of leveled it off and had all of the districts share in funding the additional students that are seen in the districts that had growth, because you're kind of harming them if you don't fund them fully and they have a limited amount of appropriation. So as Krista said, that was like the $900,000 overall decrease that we had in the Fvfp. So that's kind of the big change, but we've accounted for that in all of the information we've provided to you in the past. So that's fine. So then I am a little confused in some of the information because I've been getting different things. I have the proviso language, so I kind of went through all of it. And it actually shows in the House's offer that they kept the BSA the same as what they initially offered. But then we have a run that shows that it actually went up more. So I'm just going to kind of work off of the run that they gave us. The proviso language, the good thing that I saw in there was that the House had initially set aside $1 billion of the CARES 2 to kind of reimburse themselves for the hold harmless. And it looks like they've taken that out. In their offer, it's shown that they've not included it anymore. So that was good. So it falls under the category of the remaining funds. So the CARES 2, they do have set aside in 4 buckets. So one bucket is to find the children who are missing in the state. So for us, that's about 1.2 million, and it has an allocation for every district. So for us, that's 1.2 million. There's an allocation for academic acceleration. I can only assume that means to accelerate our kids to get them back to where they were. I can't imagine it's to move them higher. So that's $6 million. That is what we're using for our programming for the summer and for in the next school year too for after school programming or whatever it is we need to do. We're already anticipating summer school. If we can get all the teachers, it'll be about $4.5 million, which is way more than it's ever been but more than double of what it's been in the past. So we're hoping to reach as many kids as we can. And then there's another component of the CARES 2 that's set aside now for technology. That's not something we had originally anticipated. And that's like $1.5 million. So I will use that as the reimbursement for the laptops that we purchased. That was like $1.6 million. So that kind of covers that. And then the rest is what they're calling a lump sum allocation. And that goes to DOE. DOE determines the allocations by district. Each district, as well as their charter schools, must provide an extremely detailed plan to them from which they need to then provide those plans to the legislature. And that's how we'll get our funding. So at the end of the day, I think we're going to get all of our money that was included in ESSER 2. I just think there's more, like there's certain buckets it's aligned to specifically. So they're making sure you spend the money in those areas, and then the rest is for everything else. So that was included in the proviso also. I mentioned the reserve. In the final Fvfp run, and it says final, and I don't think they're at final yet, are they? I would didn't think so yet. I didn't even think it had gone to conference, but literally the run that's dated April 18th says Fvfp final conference calculation. So that threw me off a little bit too. But it has the base student allocation going up to 4380.52, so an increase of 6103. So the original offer, or the original House budget, went up by $52. So now it's 61, which, I mean, I'll take it every day of the week. It has the teacher salary increase allocation going from 500 million to 550. I didn't think anybody but the governor had an actual increase in the teacher salary increase allocation, so I'm a little confused by that one. Plus, there's nothing in the proviso for the House offer that says it. And it includes an increase in the reserve, the student reserve allocation of to 464 million, and it was 335 in the proviso. So, not really sure which one is correct, but this is the run that's out there that everyone has and everyone's working from. So, this does increase it a little bit more. But it also takes into account that the House has accepted the Senate's supplemental academic instruction numbers. So that extra $4 million we were going to get, we're not going to get. So I'm kind of hoping that the increase in the BSA kind of offset that. But at the end of the day, when we did kind of a trial run of the Fvfp, because we don't have a full one that shows it by county, we're actually, with this, even with the increase in the BSA, kind of getting a little bit less money. Because again, you can't count on the reserve allocation. So that's kind of where we're at. We're watching it very closely. Hopefully you guys will get some better information this afternoon from the lobbyists on what they're seeing going on. But you know, every time I get something, we're looking at it to see where are we at, and you know, is anything changing? And but that's kind of where we're at right now.
Thank you very much. I think this gives us an overview of where we've been, where we're at, because things are changing as we go, and every time you come to us, you seem to have different numbers, and I understand that, and I wonder how much longer after you retire that you'll have these numbers going through your head. Two things. On the FRS, there was an FRS increase. Do you have an idea of a per student cost? I mean, because, I mean, they're telling us they're giving us all this money, but in a different area, they're taking it back.
I thought you might ask that. So I already had that calculated for you. I actually didn't go by per student, but I can tell you that just as for overall, the House, theirs was an increase. Well, they're going from 10 to 10.82%. And the Senate's, we're going from 10 to 10.66. So the Senate's a little less. So the House is roughly going to cost the district, based on the budget, which is built in there, an additional $2.3 million for the FRS increase. And the Senate is 1.9 estimated increase. And like I said, they're already built into your projections.
And also you've built in the 0.5 automatic increase for all of the teachers. And then that the increasing teacher salary that the state is giving us, that's basically to fund what we already gave them last year.
It's continuation of the funding, right?
Yeah, so it's not new funding for a new raise.
No, then we'd need $1 billion.
So basically,
right.
this what you're giving us now only has the 0.5% increase for the.
Yes, the funding remains pretty much status quo. So any freed up funds that we've got from retired employees or employees who've left is what we'll use to cover the cost of new hires. So it kind of stays pretty much flat. Because you always have that attrition over the years and new hires over the years. And, you know, the portion of the funding that's being used for our retirees was 3% or something. It was smaller than what a brand new teacher, which went from 44.3 to 47.5. So each one of those was receiving $3,200 from that portion. So I think at the end of the day, it'll be, about the same amount of money. My bigger concern is what the reporting requirements may be on that, because we don't account for those dollars separately as a part of your salary. They're a part of your salary. So So that's the only concern we have, or that's a concern for all finance officers actually across the state.
And I see that, you know, there's a reduction in the tax rate, the millage rate, by about 0.2%.
Correct.
Give or take. But homes can increase up to 3%. So even though our millage rate might go down, some homeowners might see an increase in their property taxes for schools, but it's much less than what would have been
Yes,
if
and
we hadn't included the overall.
Right, and then the voted millage, the extra 1 mil, and the discretionary millage, of course, those are flat percentages, so those align with the value of your home. So if you've had growth, if you've got a homestead, it's no more than 3%. So if you've had growth, then you will see that increase there also.
Thank you. Tom?
I would certainly invite you to hang out while we talk to the legislators or the lobbyists,
Oh,
just because your questions and concerns would go right there. So I would love for you to be here.
You great minds think alike, because I put on a Post-it note and said the exact same thing to Dr. Asplin.
We used to, back when Lori was here, the chair, finance, and I think, and I'm not sure who else, and the superintendent, we were in a room by ourselves. And this year we're having the lobbyists address the entire board on camera. And I would hope that y'all prefer that. I mean, we could go back to the back room where Mitzi could ask the questions, but you also have associations that look at the budget, and you get together with them or watch what they're doing, just like we've got FSBA giving us information.
Yes, in the consortium weekly meetings, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes, okay, so you're welcome to ask our lobbyists any questions when they come on. Is that?
Sure.
Definitely.
Any other questions for staff?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anytime.
Thank you for trying to put it together and make sense in a nonsensical world. We're calling for a lunch break, but I think we're early. Could we move ahead to the item number 5, the face mask policy? Could we discuss that before lunch? Move it out of agenda?
That would be fine with me if the board is okay with that.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Dumas, I know we're going to.
So, Dr. Asplin, I have invited Michael Drennan, who was coming on for the time scheduled. So if you still want Michael Drennan, I'll have to call and see if he can get on early, or we could have a conversation without him, whatever the board prefers.
Well, let's see if we need him, and we'll call him if we do.
I would like to have that community input.
I personally would like to definitely, because I certainly think a lot of the questions would frame around the current events and DOH being relevant to that. The only other thing is that I think this is there's a high interest, and I don't know how many people have, we certainly have the ability to move things around, but with those two.
Well, we could come back at 1 o'clock.
And one other comment too, just so you know, I did touch base with Dr. Gordillo. I had requested he be on here today, but he's been away on vacation. He's just back, so he's super busy, but he did relay kind of his thoughts and ideas to me. So when we get into the conversation, I certainly can relay his opinion, and then we'll have Michael Drennan in the conversation also.
Okay, well, then we will take a break now, and we will reconvene at 1 o'clock to hear from our lobbyists and our health experts.
Thank you.
Thank you.